Keller University moderators. I wanted to just put together a quick video of some tips that I know will help you with your job and your role of facilitating, moderating a Keller University course. So we're just going to go through some quick things, and then hopefully that will make everything go a little bit more smooth. First of all, I know we've said this over and over, but please arrive to your Zoom session at least 15 minutes early. I know that 15 minutes, 10 minutes goes so fast. So if you can even make it earlier, that would be great, especially if you're one of the moderators for an outside presenter. You are the one starting the Zoom session. So obviously follow the directions on how to do that sent to you previously, but that's super important. Another thing is ask your presenters how to handle a couple things. So, for example, they're going to have links to websites, to maybe their slideshow, things like that, their resources. How do they want to get those to you? Do you want to contact them prior to the session? That's a great idea, actually, because there's several things that I'm going to go over here in just a second that would be super easy to do via email. So if they have links, could they share it in a Google Doc to you? Could they text it to you, email it to you, whatever works. But if they could just kind of go through their session and think about, okay, my moderator is going to need to put this in the chat window so my participants can click on it. It makes it so much easier if they can just click on it. And then another couple of things that you might want to ask your presenter: what do they want you to do if participants have questions that you are not going to know the answers to? I know you're probably not going to have all the content knowledge and the answers. So do they want you to unmute and interrupt the session and ask? Do they have a special time at the end, like a Q&A time, that you can maybe make notes of the questions? Do they want you to text them? That might be a solution if they share their cell number with you. Or do they want you to maybe just privately message those people with questions and ask them to email you maybe at a later date? So just kind of have that quick conversation before the session. At the start of the session, one thing you need to make sure to do is ask that presenter to give you co-host privileges for the Zoom. And that way, this is super, super important, you are going to be able to admit those attendees. So ask for those co-host privileges. Once they do that, you'll get a little box in your presenter's window that will show you people are in your waiting room. So just remember to admit and admit all, if you just want to do it in one click, those attendees. And that's your job. And obviously do it at the time that your presenter feels ready. So if your session starts at 1 and your presenter's ready to go at 1, then do it then. Please be positive. Keep the positive vibe of Keller University up. We have always had such a great positive vibe during the live session. We want that to continue with our virtual Keller University. A couple of ideas: welcome so and so, glad you're here. Welcome everyone, so glad you could make it. And then just, again, keep it positive. Emojis are great. But just know that whatever you put in the chat window, if you admit someone after that, they cannot see the chat prior to when they were admitted to the session. Moderating your KU session. So once it starts and it's kind of gotten going, you've admitted everyone, just keep a close eye on the chat. Don't admit everyone and then do something else, because you kind of want to keep a pulse on what their questions are, what the presenter's presenting. Answer any questions you can, or have some sort of an answer ready to go, like we talked about earlier. Have your links ready. Just listen, pay attention, and then be ready. The presenter could reach out to you and say, hey, so-and-so, what are the people saying in the chat in response to my question? Or are they having any questions? So then obviously you would unmute. Typically, you're just going to keep muted. So keep the mute button clicked so your microphone isn't picking up your movements and speech as they present. A couple of things about Zoom. When you're moderating your KU session, you're going to want to click at the bottom of your screen. There's a toolbar, the participants button, which brings up a screen that looks like this. And then you'll want to click the chat button, which we'll talk about in a minute. So in this participants window, you will see some really cool indicators if you pay attention. For example, there's this recording button if your session is being recorded, and I think most of these are. There's a screen share indicator. indicating who's sharing their screen. So that's kind of a nice way to check. And then there is a microphone indicator telling us whose microphone is turned on and whose is off. So that's nice to just have a little quick check on things. So there are indicators in Zoom called nonverbal feedback indicators, which are really cool. You may or may not use these, but just keep an eye on the participants window for these as well. A participant may decide to raise their hand, so you can see that in the screenshot. And once that hand is addressed, or maybe that question is addressed, you or the presenter can lower the hand. They may have the presenter may ask a question and there's a check mark that shows us that they agree or they have responded. So the nonverbal feedback cues are really cool. There's one that's on a break. I don't think our 1 hour sessions will probably use that, but that is there as well. One thing you can do in the participants window is mute people. So if you hover over their name, a box like this one will pop up and you can mute them. You might want to discuss with your presenter how to handle that. If maybe somebody's environment is a little bit loud, maybe the dog starts barking or whatever, how do you want to handle that? You could come on live and ask them, remind all participants to mute. That might be a nice way to handle it, a first step in that situation. Also, be aware in the participants window, it's usually at the lower corner. There's 3 dots, and there's a lot you can do here in the 3 dots. You can check mute participants on entry. You can turn on, allow participants to unmute themselves or leave that. It's up to you guys. Allow participants to rename themselves. You can have the chime that plays upon entering and exiting. That might help you as a moderator. And then by default, the attendees should be going to a waiting room, so you want to leave that on. Lock meeting, I don't think you'll need. That's if you decide not to let anybody in at some point. But the thing I wanted you to see here is the clear all feedback. That's for those nonverbal feedback cues that we mentioned earlier. So you can, once all the questions were answered, maybe that presenter is using those as the feedback, and you can clear it in one step. In the chat portion of the participants window, I know on mine, when I click participants, then I click chat, it's under the participants. There's 3 dots, look for those as well, and note some of these options that you can click. Allow attendees to chat with. Notice on this screenshot, the host only is an option. If you want to allow those attendees to chat with everyone publicly, that can be checked, or publicly and privately can be checked. That may be a conversation you have with your presenter. I think this is a little different than a classroom setting, so I'm not as worried about these settings as I would be maybe with students. Okay, sharing your screen in Zoom. I know many of you have probably done this, but just know if that presenter has any issues, this is just kind of a nice thing to be aware of since you are there for support for your presenter. The share screen button is again on that same toolbar at the bottom, and it looks like this, but by default only the host can share their screen. So if there's 2 presenters, maybe there's a co-presenter and they're struggling, this is just a great thing for the presenters to check. There's a little caret to the right of the share button right here, and if they click that, they can change the default setting for only the host can share to all participants can share. I mean, there may be a situation where they ask a participant to share, something they've created. In addition, this is actually a really great troubleshooting thing for you to have in your tool belt. If they're playing videos or anything with audio, they need to make sure when they share their screen that this little button is checked, share computer sound, share computer sound. I know I've gone to play a YouTube video before and the volume is down, or it literally is not playing at all. Well, when they screen share, they just need to click that. Usually it stays checked if they've done it before, but it may be something you guys want to check ahead of time. If they've already started sharing, there's another way to do it. They can click the 3 dots, the more button on this lower toolbar, and click share computer sound. So either way works. Finally, just so you know, this is also just another tool you can have in your tool belt. When you screen share through Zoom, you can also choose other things, such as not just your screen, but a whiteboard. There's just a plain white whiteboard that participants can mark up and type onto or draw onto. So that's an option if they click that middle button. There's also the option to share your iPhone or iPad, and there's a couple ways they can do that. They can do it via Wi-Fi. That would be something I would want to test ahead of time, or if they're cabled into their computer. So if they have a USB cable and they have that iPad or iPhone connected directly. Those are options built into Zoom that might be helpful to your session. Thank you so much for signing up to support our presenters and our sessions at Keller University. We just cannot thank you enough. Uh, it's because of people like you that Keller University Virtual is going to be successful, and we just are so appreciative. Thank you again, and I hope these tips help.